It is 9 a.m. on Tuesday, September 5th. We'll call the Wright County Board of Commissioners to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On this wonderful, sunny, hot Tuesday with the first day of school, welcoming kids back. We'll begin with the minutes from the August 15th board meeting. Is there any corrections to the August 15th board minutes?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
two things. On page 3, under claim amount for expedition services, it went from $69.63 to $7,200 a month. Just a correction in the number. And then under page 4, under Matt Detchen's Park and Rec, it should be noted that County Attorney Lutz advised the board that if an attorney was needed for an evening meeting, that he would certainly provide one. That's all I had for that meeting.
Okay.
So I'd make a motion to approve those meeting minutes with those two changes.
All right. We have a motion by Commissioner Catchmark,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? Commissioner Catchmark, I'm assuming if you haven't already, just email those into administration.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did provide those to the minute taker.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. With no other modifications, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved unanimously. Now the approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole for the Wright County Economic Development Partnership and the Wright County Historical Society on August 22nd.
Chairman, I had just one clarification that I shared with Caitlin, and that was that it was stated that the Albertville and Otsego have their own internal EDA, and they do not.
Okay. So that's the correction and clarification, okay? With that, are entertaining a motion for the approval of those minutes with that clarification?
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Holland,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes approved unanimously. Now the approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole Budget on August 29th.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I had a couple things here. Page 3, middle of the first paragraph. Catchmark would like to see existing positions being utilized more, such as the telecom specialist position. That was for the IT request. And then page 8, end of the third paragraph, last line, talking about the firearms instructor, to add, the sheriff said that he will show the county board the contract. And the last point, page 5, third paragraph, Catchmark noted that the Cokato Museum does good work, and we have a historical society that we are mandated to have and give money to, but we don't give any money to the museum. And those changes are provided to the minute taker also.
Thank you, Commissioner Catchmark. With that, is there a motion for the approval of those?
I'll make that motion.
Oh, wait,
You have some additional corrections.
I have
Hold
one
tight.
correction.
We'll remove your motion. All right.
One correction I shared with Caitlin is when it said that the sheriff gave the $350 million, the awarded money, that he was the one to tell all the people about it. I had mentioned that Albertville had already known and was going to be spending some of that in a different way. So I shared that with Caitlin.
All right. With that, so looking for a motion now with those both corrections to the Budget Committee of the Whole minutes.
I'll make that motion,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair.
Motion by Commissioner Catchmark,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes pass unanimously. Today's agenda, is there anything that we need to add to today's agenda for further discussion? There was 2 items that I was going to add on there. One was to set a Budget Committee of the Whole, and the second one was to schedule a special board meeting for Tuesday, September 25th.
26th, I believe.
Or, sorry, September 26th, you're right, that Tuesday, my
Those
bad.
were the two items I had as well, so.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion then to approve the agenda with those additions.
All right, so we have a motion by Commissioner Catchmark,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda approved unanimously. Today's consent agenda. Would anyone like to remove anything from today's consent agenda for further discussion? Hearing none, otherwise I'll entertain a motion to approve today's consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Dietrich,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda approved unanimously. Now moving on to the timed agenda item, the 9:05, Virgil Hawkins, which looks like it might be Chad here today, coming up to schedule a public hearing on the Tuesday, October 3rd, to update the list of local option sales tax.
Thank you, Commissioner Vetch. Good morning, rest of the commissioners. We just have one timed item today. And like Derek said, it's just to set a public hearing for updating the loss list, mainly to generalize the all highway maintenance facilities eligible for loss funds, as opposed to, say, like Maple Lake shop. It would just be all shops. So that's kind of the intent of what we'd like to update. So.
And this is all the recommendations that came out of the Transportation
Correct.
Committee of the whole. So there's nothing outside of that that should be noteworthy. This is just actually formalizing those recommendations from the Transportation Committee of the whole.
Yeah. So like I said, dates that work, we'll get one set, so.
All right. I'm assuming it's going to be at 9:30 on the Tuesday, October 3rd. Typically, that's our public hearing time.
Typically, yes.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to set the public hearing for 9:30 on Tuesday, October 3rd.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Dietrich,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Public hearing set unanimously. Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right. Moving on to the 9:10, I see Ross in the back there, asking to authorize the Director of Parks and Recreation to execute a notice to proceed with Phase 3 of the Schroeder Park Campground.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Wasn't sure if you were done.
Finish what you were doing.
Got
You're
it.
good.
Yep, staff is here today to request authorization for the Director of Parks and Rec to execute the notice to proceed to Phase 3 for the Schroeder Campground redevelopment project and the acceptance of the guaranteed maximum price. So through this process, starting back in February, the county entered into agreement with Bradbury Stram to begin construction process for the Schroeder Park redevelopment, the North Loop. That initial agreement was approved on February 28th, and then as construction has proceeded, January 17th was the first phase was concluded, which included cost estimates and a conceptual plan, which was reviewed and approved here to go to the next phase, which was the bidding process and construction documents. We've been completed with that process, and through that process, we have what's called a guaranteed maximum price of $1,791,284. The funding for this project was broken down into $153,400 allocated from the Schroeder Park Improvement Fund, and then $1,637,884 is allocated from general fund. If this is approved, we're hoping to start construction, break ground on September 17th.
All right. Any questions from board members? All right. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to authorize the Parks and Recs Director to move forward.
So moved.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Dietrich,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Thank you for the update on this. This has kind of been a item that's been on the CIP and on the plan for quite some time. It's nice to see it come forward and come to fruition, a highly utilized park, much needed with the amount of utilization that one season. But I think it's probably on the percentage for the size of the park, it's probably the most utilized percentage-wise for the number of sites.
Agreed. Yep.
I'm looking forward to seeing the final.
Yeah, I bet you are.
With no other discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the 9:15 item. I appreciate the county attorney, Brian Lutz, coming here today and talking to the board a little bit about some controversial legislation regarding the SROs in the schools.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. And I apologize, last week I was at the Budget Committee, the whole meeting, until the break, and then I thought things were kind of done, and I went back to my office. I wish I would have been here to answer some questions then. Let me start off by saying to me, it's a misguided piece of legislation, and one that is ambiguous and has created a lot of negative public sentiment and has become very much a political issue. I met with the SRO command staff from the Sheriff's Office a few weeks ago to discuss the legislation, and that was before I get in the nuts and bolts of it, I just wanted to give a little background information on it. I met with the Sheriff's Office command staff to consult with them and advise them on this issue. And like I said, that was before the Attorney General's Office advisory opinion. And I was impressed with, I guess, the thoughtfulness of the Sheriff's Office command staff about this issue and the level of training that they did already in connection with this and education that they did. And they had a plan in place to educate the SROs and address this. And I guess just the historical data that they had already gathered, there were only 3 instances from the previous school year where the SROs went hands-on or had any physical contact with a student. And I think it just, I know many of the commissioners go to safe school meetings as I do, and it just was illustrative of the relationships that we have in the schools and just the importance of keeping our schools safe. And the SROs, they're really the heart of that, and so I think it's a bad idea that, agencies across the state are pulling their SROs from the school. I understand why they're doing so, but I think it's a bad idea, and I think the decision from our Sheriff's Office, to keep the SROs in the schools was the correct one, and I supported it. Is there some risk? Absolutely there's some risk. There's some risk every day that they do their job, whether it's in the school or out on the street. But I think the benefit that is, the dividend that we get from having the SROs in the school far outweighs the potential for risk because of this legislation. And just on the news last night, I'm hopeful they're going to fix it. But again, no one has a crystal ball. But I think everyone's aware of the problem. So I just wanted to give that background. And I did email to Mr. Kelly and to the commissioners some materials that I wanted to rely on. And I know that the board, this issue has been in the news a lot. So you may already be aware of that. But I just wanted to refer to a couple things, if it's okay. So this is what's that? Sure. Here we go. Just wasn't in right? Yeah. So what I'm highlighting here, commissioners, and I'll just note 121A, that's the statute that governs regular ed, and 125A is what governs special ed. And I'm going to refer to both of the statutes. So a couple of changes here in the regular ed statute, and I'm referring to subdivision 2A. It made clear that the prone restraint and physical hold restrictions apply to police officers, school resource officers contracted with the school. And our SROs are contracted with the school. So I think clearly we're covered, our SROs that are in the school are covered by this legislation. And where there's the ambiguity, and this is what I had discussed with our sheriff's office even before the Attorney General's opinion came out, it says, nothing in this section or section 125A.0941, which is the special ed statute. And the special ed statute already had some provisions in their law that restricted prone restraint and physical holds that restrict breathing. So that was already in the special ed legislation. And so it says nothing in this section or 125A.0941 precludes the use of reasonable force under 125A.582. So it was my impression when I met with our sheriff's office command staff that they would still have the ability to use reasonable force despite these restrictions on prone restraint and restrictions on breathing. And I know Chief Tricor's here and the Sheriff Derringer are here. They're in a much better position to talk about when our officers would use this. But it's my understanding, we don't typically use prone restraint anyway. But when I met with our officers prior to the opinion of the AG's office, their concern was, what if someone went down, a student went down in the course of a physical altercation, even though we didn't use prone restraint, but it resulted in that type of an outcome. And I think the Attorney General's opinion clarified that. But it was my opinion, even before that advisory opinion came out, that they would have the right to use reasonable force because of that statutory provision that I just referred to. And so the next subdivision 1 talks about, and this you can see just with the elimination of one word or. That's what led to the change that we're dealing with. Under the old law for reasonable force, you could use reasonable force to restrain a student or to prevent imminent bodily harm. What the new legislation did is it removed the or, so you could only restrain a student to prevent bodily harm or death to the student or another. So that's what the change came from. It used to be okay to use reasonable force just to restrain somebody. Now, you're only going to use reasonable force when there's a threat of bodily harm or death. But again, if you look back at the historical data, which gave me some comfort in advising our officers that, in my opinion, it was okay to stay in the school as SROs. Again, there are only 3 instances in a whole calendar year where our officers use force. And then the next I went to, just for comparison, this is the special ed statute, and they cited, and this was already an existing law, standards for restrictive procedures. And it engages in conduct prohibited under 121A.58, but then it has an even broader reasonable force statute, which again, to me, created some ambiguity and some authorization for the use of force. There's nothing in this section or section 125A.0941 precludes the use of reasonable force under section 121A.582, which is a statute I just referred to, the regular ed statute, 60906, which is the statute that governs use of force just in general by police officers, and 609379 is use of force by parents or school teachers. So to me, there was some statutory authorization for the continued use of reasonable force, despite the statute that talked about not using prone restraint or physical restrictions on breathing. And then, my position is nonpartisan, but, I lean conservative, as I think many of the commissioners do. And our Attorney General's office, is not supported well out here, let's just say it that way, but they do some good things for us. They do my appellate work, and I'm appreciative of that. Like the All-Rich appeal, they have very much experts who do appeals, so they do my appeals. And I think when presented with this issue, they wrote a solid advisory opinion. And just for education of Mr. Chair and the commissioners, when the Attorney General's office issues an advisory opinion, what that means is that has the weight of law until a decision from a court of competent jurisdiction would decide the issue. So this is something that our officers can rely upon, and has the binding weight of law unless and until there's a decision to the contrary in a court of competent jurisdiction. And I highlighted just a couple of things. They go through and analyze the statutes that I just took you through. But their summary of conclusion was that, Frank, can you let me share again, or is it? Yeah, thank you. I highlighted the summary of conclusion. The amendment does not limit the types of reasonable force that may be used by school staff and agents to prevent bodily harm or death. The test for reasonable force remains unchanged, and it's highly fact-specific. But again, that's where the historical data was comforting to me in that we only had 3 instances in last school year. And those of you who attend safe schools, we hear about the behaviors in the school, and I think it just, it's a testament to how good our school resource officers, how well-trained they are and how educated they are, and what a good relationship they have with the schools, because we all play a part in safe schools, but they're really the heart of it, and they're the ones that the schools are seeing every day. And just to highlight some of the staff involved, Lieutenant Johnson, who was in charge of the training center, he was running the training for the SROs. He was part of that meeting with the command staff. Sergeant Leander, who I would say is probably the preeminent expert in the state on school safety issues, who's just been doing it for so long and knows everybody in the schools. Mike McGill, another sergeant who's involved, he was the one who provided the data on the limited instances that our officers went hands-on last year, and obviously many others. But, it was actually one of Jason Post, who's a deputy in the Monticello schools where I have kids attending, who came to me with the 125A language that referred to use of reasonable force under 60906, and also 609, I think 379. So, they were on this issue before I was on it and concerned about it and trained for it. And so that's why I'm very comfortable, albeit there is risk. Like I said, there's risk every day when they do their job. But I think the benefit of having them in the school far outweighs the potential for risk. And I'd be strongly advocating for keeping them in our schools.
Commissioner Vetch.
Yes.
I thank you for coming, because, I last week met with our superintendent, Dr. Foucault. She's also the president-elect of the Superintendents Association, and all the superintendents of Minnesota are concerned, and this was really good information. I think their biggest concern is the fact that they can be criminally and civilly charged. And so I think they all are worried about our SROs, but I do have to say, and being on the school board, I love the SRO program. And so, when we're seeing all these, departments pulling theirs, that's, I think, it's been in the news. I think it's a good discussion to have in this meeting. But I just really want, to make sure our officers are safe. So I think, saying that, that what you're feeling, that was really good information. I'm still kind of nervous about if it would go at the state level, because, in the past, we've seen AG Ellison, kind of not pro officer. So that was my concern.
Yeah. And I think it's a concern of mine as well, and I hope none of my cases are ever taken over by his office, and I would resist that to the best of my ability. But I think what this advisory opinion does is it does adhere the Attorney General's office to a position that is supportive of the SROs being in the schools. And as long as that threshold of, fear of bodily harm or death is implicated, I can't foresee a circumstance where they would be able to come in and say otherwise with this official opinion already on record.
I appreciate Mr. Lutz talking through this, because this arms us with better information to educate people in the public, because when that advisory opinion came out there, the media latched onto it, and a great deal of people in the general public got the feeling that SROs were going away. That I don't believe is anything that the county board, much less yourself or the Wright County Sheriff's Department, wanted to see happen. I think other areas within the state have taken those actions. and we wanted to make sure that we had good information to be able to articulate out, and I really appreciate this education here because it puts us in a better position to help people understand that SROs are still welcome and needed within our school districts, so.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the support. As a, not only county attorney, but as a parent with kids in the school district, I appreciate the support and the work of our SROs in our school.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thanks for coming in, Attorney Lutz, and for sending material ahead of time. Unfortunately, I shut things down yesterday at 3 o'clock here, and I didn't see this till 8 this morning, but it's good info. I was wondering if the deputies union, my phone hasn't rang from these folks, but because they have legal defense and an attorney, have they weighed in on any concerns, thoughts, one way or another, on behalf of the deputies that this would affect, one way or another?
Yes, they have weighed in, you know, I think with a very cautious message that it may be wise to remove the SROs from the school. I think that's been their message. And I think, you know, quite honestly, it's become a political issue. But given that the conversations I've had with our command staff in charge of the SROs, I'm comfortable advising them to stay in the schools or weighing in on that decision. But to answer your question, I think their advice, they may not have said it in a conclusory fashion, but it would be well considered to remove your SROs from the school. Has been
Oh,
the-
okay, good to know. And like I said, I hadn't heard, but I thought they would have a voice. Next thing would be off-duty gigs. I know they work at hockey games and football games. These deputies are not under contract like the SROs. Any deputy can sign up. So how do they work in with this language as a non-contracted deputy working on the grounds of the school for a school function? Are they held accountable to the same standard as the contracted SRO?
Yeah, it's my opinion that under this law, they would be subject to the same restrictions as the contracted SRO, working a school event as such.
Okay, because the school's writing the check. Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
they'd be an agent of the school in essence. That's my legal opinion.
Okay. And one last thing on that, the reasonable force standard with the old language, if we respond to a call at a school and the report is, we got the kid closed off in this classroom and he's tearing up the room, property damage only, but it could flip at any time, of course. The old way, as I read it, would allow the deputy to come in and control the guy or the kid physically. This way, you have to show that there's a likelihood of imminent bodily harm or death, which there's a difference there.
Correct.
So what would be the recommendation for a property damage only situation that's the way it stands when you get there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the advice, I think, and it leads to kind of an absurd result, in my opinion, and illustrates a problem with the law. I think in that situation where it would be property damage only, and it doesn't, you know, you could foresee a circumstance where property damage, like you're busting windows, throwing desks, that would rise to the level of implicating bodily harm. And there is a distinction, and I should have highlighted and I didn't. School officials, it has to be imminent, and for SROs and contracted law enforcement, it just has to be the threat of bodily harm. But if it is just property damage, my advice to the command staff was that you would then have to call a patrol deputy. Say if it's at Monticello High School, you would have to have a patrol deputy come in and make that arrest or make that physical contact. So that's the absurdity in this law right now.
That is, so that's good that you understand it that way also,
Yeah.
that you can call in the cavalry that's not under contract and the rules are different.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is some of the basis for why we think SROs is a good idea. If you look at a city like St. Michael, Monticello, if you don't have an SRO in the school, you're going to be, the deputies assigned to Monticello, they're going to be coming to the schools regularly to the point of almost acting as an SRO. So I don't think, for the few instances which hopefully this arises, it should be okay to have a patrol deputy who's not an SRO respond to that call. Again, absurd in my opinion, but that's what this law has left us with.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, thanks for making time for me, appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Great information. All right, moving on to the next item, the 9:30, right on time here for the Health and Human Services portion of the board meeting. First item on the agenda for the Health and Human Services portion of the board meeting is the approval of the consent agenda. We have 4 items on that consent agenda. Entertaining a motion, or if anybody would like to remove any of them for further discussion.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Holland,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane, for the approval of the consent agenda for the Health and Human Services. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, the consent agenda for Health and Human Services is approved unanimously.
Thank you, and I would just also add, you'll probably see some more of the retreat requests coming through the board, because I think fall is a popular time for that. With our high staff to supervisor ratio and with our amount of people that we have remote working, I think it's a really good opportunity for the teams to come together and spend a day together on a retreat. So we appreciate the board's forbearance with our pursuing that. Thank you.
First item on the timed agenda is the recognize the Health and Human Services Employee of the Month for September.
Yes, I would like to invite Lori Davis to join me at the podium. Lori? Lori's here today with her supervisor, Rochelle Kramer. Lori is kind of a slam dunk employee of the month. I'll give you a heads up. So our September employee of the month is Lori Davis. Lori is a case aide in the Social Services Assessment Services team. She joined Wright County in December 2008 and joined the assessment team in November of 2013. Her nominator, another MnChoice's reassessment worker, shared feedback from a client. Thanks so much for putting me in contact with Ms. Davis. I had several questions that I felt were urgent and was getting anxious with respect to my mother's EW waiver. That's an elderly waiver. Ms. Davis addressed all of my concerns, giving me timelines and expectations. She made me much more comfortable with where my mother's application was and assured me that she would check on the application and follow it through. I can rest easy knowing that things are being handled and nothing will fall through the cracks. Her team member added, Lori followed up with the client, responding timely, explaining the processes in a way the client could understand, was caring and kind to the client and family. Client has recently moved to a different county where she is now able to get the services she needs due to Lori's patience and professionalism in answering the family's and clients' questions. Lori's supervisor states, Lori consistently exceeds expectations in her work output, creativity, problem solving, commitment to service and investment in her job. She tackles her work assignments with grace and quickly becomes proficient in all she touches. Lori brings new ideas with the goal of improving efficiencies and services to our constituents. Thank you, Lori, and congratulations on being our September 2023 HHS Employee of the Month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything?
I don't. Usually I'm the one that's talking a lot, and
She does. Actually, can I share a story from the old building? We were asked to give Lori her own office because of all the talking she does with clients, because she spends so much time on the phone. So she's back in a cube
and
now.
now I'm speechless. It is very nice, though. This is a nice opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lori, for all your hard work and dedication to the citizens of Wright County.
Thank you.
And I'm sure it's frustrating sometimes because, again, this is a MnChoice's area where we have wait lists and things like that. So I'm sure when you explain the timelines and the expectations, it's good for folks to know that how much time it is going to take so they can react and respond accordingly.
And we work on things up front to get things moving a little bit faster once they
And
finally
do
get
some
there.
triage.
Yeah.
So thank you, Lori. Thank you, Rochelle, for coming.
Now moving on to the second timed item is the approval of the 2022 debt write-off. This is a annual exercise that is uncollectible debt, or that the county has deemed as uncollectible debt, that we write that off our books. So,
And I will have Christina Klopaki come and share with you what our findings were in this past. It's actually the 2022 debt write-off information.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning. I hope
Morning.
I find you all well today.
We were until we saw this.
No, this is good.
All right.
My name is Christina Klapaki. Jamie invited me up here this morning to talk to you about our write-offs. I also wanted to take the opportunity to give you some background on just generally the types of debt we collect. There are 2 types, generally. The first one is county debts. These are debts that are established based on the county fee scale that's board approved each year, right? So based on the fee scale, the services Human Services is providing, there may or may not be a fee for those services. And then to write it off, we then also follow the county policy regarding the collectability of those debts. Okay. The other type of debt we collect is state debts. These are areas of public assistance where we follow state policies in determining whether a debt is owed, whether it's an overpayment or some other situation where the state says these funds are owed back. We then follow the state write-off criteria. We act as their fiduciary in that way. Okay, so when we look at the grid that was presented to you, you do see it broken down that way. The first, I don't know how a handful, 2, 4, 8, 10 there or so, are county programs. These are part of our fee scale. Then the second, like the lower part of it there where those 5 programs are listed, those are state programs where we have said the funds are owed, and then following the state write-off criteria, these amounts fell into those, okay? Below the grid, you do see something labeled Criteria 1 and Criteria 2. That is the county policy. That is the county write-off policy. So you do see those columns in the grids, okay? So if you're anything like me, you looked at this information, I looked at it this morning, and I thought, okay, you know, we wrote off 26, detox services. Proportionately, those are averaging $355 a day. So as we go across the grid, it looks fairly proportionate. Then you got to the one labeled out-of-home placement and criteria 2, and you saw the amount listed and you went, what happened here? This isn't proportionate, right? So I looked into those this morning. As I looked into what occurred in 2022, in particular for that category of service and that write-off criteria, criteria 2, there were 3, I'm going to call them cases or situations, where the amount owed was over $17,000 on each of them. So there was one family that owed $17,552. When I looked at my predecessor and the activity that she attempted to try to do, it did fall into criteria 2. The party moved around, whereabouts were unknown, we were not able to renew that judgment. Collectability, if we cannot find them, we cannot collect it. There was another situation or family household that owed almost $23,000. Same thing. The debt was from early 2000s originally. The agency was unable to locate the family. It was a full cost at that time. Our fee policy, advocated for the agency to try to work with clients to determine a fee. And if the client did not cooperate, we charged full cost, meaning every dollar we spent, we then assessed to the family. That fee policy has changed since then, but at the time, that was the policy. The third one I looked at, the household owed over $55,000. The debt was more than 14 years old. We did try to renew the judgment. We did know where they were. We tried to renew it, and we were unable to serve them. So the servicing agency was not able to get the paperwork in their hands. Those 3 alone are over $95,000. That's part of what's showing up in that cell, in that column. Okay? So if you're anything like me, you went, whoa, why is this number so big? And then here we had 3 households that make up the bulk of that amount. Okay, yeah. So do you have any questions for me about?
So do we file this with the IRS so it's considered as income then to those individuals, at least if they would ever file a tax, then that they have that as a, because it'd be no different than if you did a settlement with a creditor, it's considered income. So
Right. That is an IRS consideration. We currently do not. When we forgive a debt, we do not send them a 1099 or any of those things that the IRS requires.
Once it meets the statute of limitations, it's decertified once it meets the statute of limitations and is no longer collectible through the IRS.
But it still doesn't allow us to file it as a forgivable debt, so it'd be like a 1099. So then, only reason I say that because if they're going and collecting earned income credits, and I'd want that to go against that, just because if we're writing off debt that we incurred as a government agency, I wouldn't want them on the backside being able to.
Right. Right. I understand what you're saying. And yes, right, when we do our tax return every year, there is a line item that says, have you received any unforgiven debt, right? Like that is a line on there. We do not file anything currently reporting that information.
And these are also
Is
cases
that
that have
something we
a,
can do? Is it something we should do? I mean, this is a lot of money.
and when we look at these cases, there are also cases that historically we've not been receiving any tax information. It says, and no tax offsets are being received. So it's something that we review ahead of time. We can check with our finance department to see if there's another option. I think when we get to this point, we really are requesting that these be written off. I'm not sure what the point of, I think a lot of the point of the write-off is so we're spending our limited staff time on pursuing debts we can collect for the county, so we can get money back for the county, whereas in areas that we can't. If there's another place to go, and I've, again, been here for many years and it hasn't been brought up before, to look for it, we can do it, but again, I would kind of caution if it's really labor intensive, but again, would be something we might not, we can look at it, so we can take a look at it, but if it's labor intensive, then that, again, just takes away the time that we can pursue, collect our debt that we can collect, from, that we can actually get in.
Just worth the question, so.
Sure. Well, I have a meeting with Lindsay this afternoon, and I will ask her.
Mr. Chair? Thank you for being here to explain and take questions on this. One would be, the way the ARP rules seem to be floating and flying around, we have our experts here. Is there any one of these that fit for ARP money, or is just absolute no to debts that you can't claim, or? Okay. Is there any interest in talking to other counties and see if there's any other resources that they're using that we're not?
I would say a lot of counties talk to us. I think we have a really high-profile collection area for HHS, remarkably more so than many counties. So I think we're probably the place that a lot of counties come and ask questions, but you would know more
Yes.
than I.
There is a statewide collections group. We do meet quarterly, and we do send emails often asking those exact questions. This is the situation I have. What other resources can I leverage? Does any other county have ideas? So yes, absolutely. We definitely leverage our county partners across the state.
Okay.
Yes.
And you have a deputy over there. Are they able to help with investigative measures on these hard-to-find people?
I'm not sure what you mean, we have a deputy.
Well, don't you have Deputy Eaton that works under your,
Oh, yeah, no,
tutelage
she
there?
works, I would say exclusive, if the person happens to have an open adult protection case or child protection case, but that's usually not the case. If we have an open case, then, so no, we have not used her in that capacity. I don't believe it's in our agreement with the sheriff's office to use her in that capacity.
oh, well, just in these times, it seems like it's easier to find people through internet and social media and different things, and so I'm just wondering, to what degree are we using investigative measures to actually locate them? I think it's easier than it was 20 years ago, where people could disappear in the wind easier.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if all measures are being used, because that one column alone, 150,000, is a lot. Then there could be 10, 20,000 in staff time spent, and still there's 130,000 on the table that we could get back potentially. So sitting here, I just have to ask that question. One guy saw this item on the agenda and was wondering if his property taxes were forgiven debt, and I told him no, but but all right. So I guess whatever you can consider, maybe at one of these retreats, maybe a topic could be uncollectible debt, and any new ideas that people have, that might be a good topic.
Mr. Chair, I have two questions. So the first one, are all these mandatory? Like, is this something that we have to provide and take care of?
You mean as far as assessing the debt in the first place or collecting the debt?
Mandated service. maybe.
Mandated service.
Yes. I mean, in the case of fees, if they're, I guess. I'd
That
have
was
to
going
look
to
to
be
see.
my other question, because then she said, because now there was a fee policy change, correct?
So I think a lot of, a lot of the fees that we see are the out-of-home custody fees. So those, in that case, almost, are a large amount of fees as when children are placed in foster care, and then we use a new model now to what we charge the family back based on their family size and income and things like that. So that it's not an upfront. They get charged the fee over the course of the time the child's in foster care, and then we attempt to collect it after that. So in that case, yes, the kids are in foster care, the family's being charged a fee, so that would be a mandated service. Some counties don't charge families when kids are in out-of-home placement. We tended to charge families quite a bit in the past, and over the last maybe, 3 or 4 years, the board reconsidered, and we are charging at a state rate right now for the out-of-home placement costs.
And this is probably 2 years ago we had, maybe even
2,
more,
3
three
years, yeah,
years
2,
ago.
3 years.
We had a big, robust discussion about this on how those fees were assessed. And we had discussions about when the fees should be imposed. And there was a big change from the board's direction in wanting to basically, until there was a court judgment, that so when the kid was taken out of placement, that we wouldn't charge the individual until there was a judgment saying that the kids had to remain out. So it wasn't just a bureaucratic decision that you were imposing fees on, but once it went before a judge and a judge said it, then you'd start being charged fees at that point. Where before, prior to that, we would, if we removed a child from a home, you'd be incurring fees day one. Even if a judge said, no, they can go back, you'd be charged for that. We changed that mechanism to say that until after, you weren't going to be charged anything until a judgment was against you.
Chairman, one question. Hospitals use second-party debt collectors. Have we ever considered doing that, just to?
The little bit we've looked into it, maybe Tina knows more than I do. If we assign debt to a debt collector, my understanding is they collect pennies on the dollar, and we have a much higher collection rate than they do. The state had talked about taking it over at one point. I don't know if that discussion has been ongoing, because even at the state level, they've deemed it's kind of a local, entity process. So we actually have I think a really good collection rate, and as far as collection rates usually go in these kinds of situations, and as what we've seen, again, we could turn over the debt and just see pennies. We would have the work walk out the door, which would be kind of nice for us. However, I don't know if the board would be very happy with the results.
Well, in fairness, I think it would deter people, from, similar to the hospital situation, it's hard to incur a bill from the hospital, and then ultimately they throw it out there because they want to get repaid. There must be a reason that the hospitals or clinics do that, because they're getting repaid. I don't know. I'm not saying take out the internal debt collection, but when it gets to this point, I just feel like even if we don't get any money, we don't see any profit from it. At least it's sending a good message that you will, we can say it will go into collection if you don't attempt to pay for it.
They are charged collection debts when they don't pay us. So that's part of the fee now when they don't pay us, is that we charge them a collection debt. So we're gaining in that respect, because they are in collection when they're with us, when we're doing the collections.
So even with debt collectors, there's there's limitations statutorily as to how long they can go after that debt. So that's where we're saying at some point, even when it's in debt collection, whether it's a third party or ourselves doing that debt collection, they're saying that they've met the statutory limitations that we have to be able to impose this debt on them. So at that point, the bigger question is, okay, when you get to the end of that period of time, typically in a business setting, you would then write that off as like a 1099, so that like a credit card implementer would then 1099 you, saying that this $10,000 that was uncollectible by you, and they would file that with the IRS, so that you then were essentially had $10,000 in income, because that debtor couldn't collect it. And then at that point, that would go show as income for you as an individual. So therefore, it would change your income status for the
And
year.
because we're government, we have tools that we can use to collect debts that some of these other private agencies don't have. So we have more robust tools than some private debt collection agencies have
Okay.
under statute.
Thank you. It's always, I think, like you said, to your illustration, some of those debt amounts, I think, under the current model wouldn't be as high as they would
Right.
have been in 2000.
Right.
Based on the sliding scale that we have now, based on family size and income size to what it was then, as well as some of the fees that weren't imposed day one, which they aren't now, but at that time they were. So that could make those numbers
I think
look
it's-
grossly different.
Yes, and I think it's going to be, I think it is going to be, I would say, a pretty big shift. And I'll just say, I was a child support officer for many years. It was my job to set, obligations against obligors and things like that. About 15 years ago, child support went through a really seismic shift where instead of just like trying to charge as much as you can, like if we had a, let's say, unwed mother in the hospital, on medical assistance, we would charge the entire amount of the hospital stay to the dad. Once they got legally, became legally the dad, they'd get the charge the entire amount. Well, our ability to collect on that was fairly minimal. They would just basically go into hiding, not have much contact with the child or anything like that. Over time, I think a lot of that changed. It really went into a shared parenting model, and we try to set obligations that are reasonable based on the set of situations. And then we get more collections in because we're working. So I think we see a little bit of that. This is maybe not quite the same flavor because it's not necessarily dependent kids that are involved. But setting the reasonable debts, which Commissioner Vetch was talking about, I think garners us better opportunities to collect those debts in the long run. It's, if not a partnership, I think it's more of a reasonable approach from the county side to say, what can the family afford? How are we going to help them pay their debt without actually forcing the things to put them back on some of our other systems, or, some of our other benefit sets and things like that. So, it's not I don't think this is ever going to be a some win game. We're trying to collect debt because they weren't able to pay at the time. So you're always chasing this amount that's never going to necessarily get any better going down the road, even though we charge interest and things like that. So I think overall, I would say our county does a really good job in this regard. Thank you. And then our request is that you approve this debt write-off for 2022.
So at this time, I'm entertaining a motion to approve the debt write-off for 2022 for Health and Human Services.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Dietrich.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shane. I understand the hesitation on it, but this is largely just a standard business practice. So even if we don't write this off, it'll stay on the books, but it's truly uncollectible per statute. So wanting to understand that if you, even by you saying no against it, it's just going to sit on a ledger, but we can't take any active efforts to collect it because of statutory limitations. So. With that, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
We'll see you next year with hopefully a more abbreviated list. Thank you.
All right. Director's comments.
Yes, I just have a couple of things today. I would like to provide, and I might have Michelle Miller come and join me for a quick performance report. The good news, I think it was this past year, we were on a performance improvement plan in our one threshold. I think was the only one out of 11 that this occurred in. Percent of children discharged from out-of-home placement to permanency in less than 12 months. The state's threshold was 40.5%. Our performance at the time of the PIP start was 31.5%, and our performance to date is 54.22%, so well surpassing that threshold. Michelle, would you like to go over, I believe in your packets, board, you should have our child safety and permanency and MFIP self-support index packet.
So maybe first of all, are there any questions from the board about our permanency PIP? We actually knew back in February that,
We were in a good shape.
yeah, we find out about a month and a half. They only update our Tableau report monthly, but typically about a month and a half after We find out the updated information. And just, I guess, the only other piece I would add, we actually have 3 permanency.
So, I don't think that got included in the packet. Can you
No,
put
I
that
don't
one
have
up
that
on the,
either.
as I said, I was thinking, I don't remember seeing that in there under the
didn't
director's
get that.
comments.
Can you put your screen on? Is this the performance report you have right there?
No, but I can pull it up here.
I can hold it up. And as she's doing that, it's kind of interesting, when we look at these thresholds, this is dated July 2023. However, the reporting periods that the state is reporting on for the child safety and permanency is actually January 2022 through December 2022, so 2022. So we always feel like we're kind of, even if in rare situations where we do get a PIP, it's based on information that's going on a year old, and if it's at the beginning of the prior year that some of the things went down, we're well away from when it occurred. So I always feel like we're kind of, again, chasing our tail if we're working on something a year after the fact. And a lot of times we've corrected the action by the time we're actually starting the PIP action. So with that, I think Michelle can pull this up.
Anecdotally, I think these PIPs, I think in general are a good mechanism, mostly for the fact that they're trying to catch the grossly negligent organizations, the ones that are continually on a PIP, or the PIP that they have, they're scoring very, very much outside the guidelines. Because to a certain degree, no matter how hard you try, there's certain cases that are going to put you in a PIP because the clients in their situations are just.
Sometimes we know we're working very, a lot of time expended with the family, and we know this one's not going to make the time frame, and then, so it's just that game of averages, I guess. But we're talking about kids' lives and things, so it is something we do need to stay on top of.
And permanency, of course, as in a lot of areas of social services, we're working with a team. So it's not only our work as a social worker, but it's the county attorney's office, the guardian, yes, the courts, the family, of course, we're all working together. So we actually have 3 levels of permanency. So there's the 12-month, 12 to 24, and over 24. We're measured on all of these. This report only speaks to within the 12-month period. So when we had the PIP, and honestly, permanency had been on our radar before and felt like we really were struggling, we decided to take, I thought it was kind of a drastic measure, and really move a worker out of having a caseload into addressing permanency specifically. So she works directly with all the workers related to permanency. She's doing frequent tracking. She's doing training. She's writing petitions, and this has been successful. And honestly, our permanency numbers have never been better. So I feel like that, along with doing our Navigating Hope, and we're currently training all of our staff in motivational interviewing. That's related to the Families First legislation. All of these together, we have fewer kids in care. We've talked about that. Our permanency is better, and we're seeing lower repeat maltreatment. So we're feeling good about this.
Just for articulation, it's based on individual children. So if you had a sibling group, you can have one complicated case that has maybe 4 sibling groups that could, if the case was very dragged out and through the courts and whatnot, can really make yourself, because we don't have a lot of kids out of home placement. If you have one sibling group of 3 or 4 children, it can put you just that alone could put you on a PIP, because if it just took too long.
There's not been frequently, been a few times when we've had families with like 10 children where there had to be placement. So that makes big changes. Also, one thing that we have actually seen struggles with more recently is when we're working with other states. So the interstate compact, when relatives live in another state, we have to get approval from that state, Georgia, Texas, wherever. And it's a struggle because we have to work with our state folks, their local folks. So there's multiple parties, and we've had quite a few delays related to that. And it's never to the kids' benefit or the family living in that other state. So that's been difficult. And there really is no oversight. Like Minnesota can't tell Georgia, you need to get your work done. So it's more, please, can you please help us and help this family? So any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the Health and Human Services portion of the board meeting.
I am sorry,
We
I
do
just
have some more comments.
I
I'm
do.
sorry.
I apologize, there's just a couple of things. Kind of good things, I think you'll want to hear. Maybe I saved the best for last, no, I don't know what to do with my paper. I wanted to tell you that UCare grant, that at the time of the budget meeting, we weren't sure where that was at or if we were going to get it. We were awarded $50,000 for the co-responder program from UCare. So that's good news for the county. That'll impact the levy impact for the co-responder program. We're still waiting to hear from Medica. We anticipate an announcement this month. I know I keep coming back every month, it seems like, to tell you about our healthcare renewals, how the state is saying, hey, we're going to give everybody another month to get their paperwork in. Well, now they just flat out said, we're going to give everybody another month until the end of the year. So I won't come back until next year to tell you that they're giving people more time, because they're just going to give them more time until the end of the year to get their paperwork in to stay on medical assistance. And then finally, I wanted to tell you about our laundry event. I think we got $10,000 earlier this year from, I believe, Medica that we wrote a grant for. And we've had 2 laundry events now, one here in Buffalo at the coin-operated laundry, and it was very well attended. We had 29 people come in. We thought it was good timing before kids go to school. If parents are struggling with either not having washers and dryers or not having means to have their clothes washed. So we had 29 families come in and take advantage of that. I believe I want to say Bob is the owner of 2 coin-operated laundromats, and he was there, and he would give the person a card that had money on it, or a prepaid loaded card that they can go and use the washers and dryers. Medica provided us so we could buy some laundry baskets, laundry soap, and things like that. I haven't heard, we had another one then in Monticello on Tuesday from the same owner, I believe, at a coin-operated I think it was Bob as well. So a really good, I think, great PR for the county, really a nice thing to get families and kids the needs, really a practical way to use funding to help families. And it's not a mandated service, so I'll admit that right up front.
One question, is it gonna just move around the county, or are the funds gone, or what's going on?
No, I
with
believe
it?
we still have funding, because it was $10,000, and that's going to stretch away, so we hope to do some more, and I'm not sure right now what our plan is going forward.
And I saw a flyer for it in the front. Is there any other way that you publicize this, or?
It was on Facebook.
Okay.
Yep, and I think maybe this is maybe more of a word of mouth, because, to get people really seeing it, so we will have to strategize a little bit. We wanted just to kind of get our foot in the door and start doing it, especially before school started, to kind of find out what the bandwidth was. So, yes, I think we're well positioned, and I believe we do have more funding. We can continue to do this. So if you know of any laundromat, is that still a word, owners that might want to participate that's in the county, send them our way, and we'll be happy to work with them.
I'll talk to the Albertville one.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to piggyback on the SRO conversation. I appreciate the board again supporting this effort. I would say I know all of you are at the Safe School meetings for your districts. I'm at many of them over the course of the year. And how many times I've been sitting there and their walkie-talkie goes off and they jump up and they run out and they're going to go deal with something that's happening right then. So I think to me that just speaks volumes. Like if they weren't right there in the schools, who would be responding to that call? So I think it's a great program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on in the agenda to the items for consideration. The first one is the motion to approve the delegation of department, fund, and levy neutral budget amendments in Oracle Fusion to the county administrator, finance director, and assistant finance director. Administrator Kelly or Heather's going to take it.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chairman. We're here today to discuss the request for approval for the extension of the delegation for the budget amendments. It was requested that we revisit this once the new commissioners were onboarded. So is there any questions or concerns or changes that you would like to the process?
So in this process, are you asking for it to be in perpetuity, or are you asking for it to be revisited again in a later date?
I would like it to continue on. and not have to keep coming back. That would be.
I personally don't have any issues with it. You guys have used it in the fashion to the point where myself, as a board member, has no concern with it. The budget amendments do come forward in a great acknowledgement, so I don't have concerns with it. I'm open to doing it either way, whether it's in perpetuity or whether to have it revisited at a different date, whether it's a year or 2 years from now. For board members that are not aware, this basically allows the finance management as well as the administrator to make internal budget adjustments within line items as long as it holistically fits within the budget to make departments whole at their discretion, and then they make those budget amendments, acknowledgements to the board.
And I just want to point out, this is one of the good things that Oracle Fusion has done. Before, people were doing budget amendments and the board wouldn't necessarily see them. So now you cannot overspend in a line item without a budget adjustment. So it's one of the positives of Oracle.
So, Mr. Chair, are you asking us that it would just be on the consent agenda when it comes forward monthly, or what, is that what you're
Yes.
asking?
Yes,
Just to continue the
this-
practice that we've been at, we as a board, when we enacted this in a little over, or a little less than a year ago, October,
Yeah.
we didn't want to make it in perpetuity at that time because we knew that there was a vast majority of the board would be turned over, and we didn't know what levels of fiscal controls that you would want, or what type of transparency that you would want to such budget amendments. So ultimately, the only difference with this is that instead of the budget amendment actually being approved at the board meeting, it would just be acknowledged at the board meeting.
Mr. Chair. And thank you for bringing it up. And I trust the cast of characters that are noted and listed here. I don't think it's too painful to come a year from now and there could be changes to any one of us or any one of you. I don't think that's a lot to ask. The term "keep coming back" on a yearly basis, I don't think is excessive. So I would like to see it come back another year. And if we have things that come up throughout the year, we can make note, and when it comes up, we can talk about them.
I'm perfectly open to that as well. It's just every 6 months we didn't want to.
No, a year. I'm thinking a year. Is that any consensus here for that, or?
It's fine.
I think that's a good practice, so I'm fine with that. So then I would be entertaining a motion to adopt then the delegation of the department fund levy neutral budget amendments in Oracle Fusion to the county administrator, finance director, and assistant finance director to the calendar year of October 18th, 2024.
I'll make
Well
that
said,
motion.
Mr. Chair. I'll make that.
Oh, you can.
Okay.
I'll second it then.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Catchmark, second by Commissioner Dietrich. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is schedule meetings. First one is to schedule a committee of the whole for the American Rescue Plan overview and discussions of where we are and where we need to go as that comes to a close. Staff, do you have a particular targeted date for that?
Mr. Chair, I have a number of dates that could potentially work. I know later in the meeting, we are adding something to the 12th already.
I don't believe we can get any more in on the 12th, maybe unless we went in the afternoon, but I don't know if everybody's available on the 12th in the afternoon.
And the following item on the closed session, I know would not work due to conflicts on the afternoon of the 12th. So perhaps we're looking at a different day. I don't know, Monday, the 11th appears to be open right now as far as board-related meetings. Otherwise, we can pursue the following week as well.
Mr. Chair, what is this meeting for?
This is to review the ARP fund balance and how the money's been spent and what is left, and the direction of the board on actions forward with the remaining balance, as well as just educating the board on how the money to date has been spent.
That's a good summary.
About 10 o'clock on the 11th.
Let's see here.
11th's not good for me.
11th is,
14th.
I'll be at a conference, the 13th,
What is it?
14th, and 15th.
that's AMC, or
I have an
anybody that's going to the AMC on
policy
the 13th,
conference.
14th, 15th. Or should we just shoot on going to the 18th?
In the morning.
After the EDA meeting?
Yeah.
So, on the EDA
9:30?
9:30 on the 18th?
Yeah.
at 9:30. That works. September 18th. Perfect.
I'll make that motion if that's needed.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Catchmark,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we have a committee of the whole for the ARP at September 18th at 9:30 a.m.
Very good. The second item I had placed on here, board, was to have a closed session regarding labor negotiations. We are meeting with BNC Consulting, our insurance brokers, later this week as staff to get our renewal information. I want to have a closed session with the board to discuss the county's contribution towards that. So would anytime following week of the 11th or into that next week, we could have that.
I would probably say do it on the same 18th if we're gonna be doing it. Just follow it right after that at like 10:30.
Is there any chance we could move to the 19th? I know I'm going to have a conflict on that 18th that time.
19th after the board meeting, we could do it.
I'm not
So-
anticipating a terribly long meeting. for
Mr. Chair will
this.
be gone the 19th, 20, and 21st in Washington.
I don't know if we really need you anyways. Just kidding.
She'll be here in spirit.
What Monday, right after?
This-
Would that work on the 18th then?
So we can go 18th at 10:30.
But you won't be able to be there.
I'll have one of my staff cover it. I
Okay.
hate to
All
get
right.
this on the books.
10:30 a.m. on September 18th. Okay. So I entertain a motion.
I'll
So-
make that.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Catchmark,
Second.
second by Commissioner Shane to set a closed session for 10:30 on September 18th or thereabout, depending how long the first meeting goes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Now, moving down, we have the third item on the agenda is to refer items to the county board workshop on September 12th. A use number of items there. The AmeriCorps presentation, Great River Library update. Everybody's good with the items that are on there?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
A couple additions brought to my attention that we could address the use of the fitness gym in particular by non-Wright County employees, and as that relates to the rental agreement with those groups. And then we were talking about the large group assembly, that permit process. Would the staff be available or ready to present? We had talked about that, but just to, okay. So we got the okay to review that. And then what came up recently was that we don't have a policy for when we need written contracts by office and department heads in Wright County. I'd like to talk about that. Pardon me?
No, sorry.
Oh, contracts, when a written contract would be required in Wright County for office and department heads for services rendered.
So you wanted as a review how it pertains to fiscal policies within the county?
Which I guess we don't have one, so if staff can maybe, we can discuss what we'd be looking at or looking for.
Sure.
If there's a dollar
Yep.
amount or type of service.
All right. What I'm going to ask is, I know I'm going to note right now that on the workshop next week, I'm probably going to be arriving around the 10:30 hour. So I'll miss the first couple presentations, but if we can accommodate I'd like to be there for the large assembly, the contracts discussion, and the cafe items. So if those can get placed more towards the back and starting out, as you have listed here, the first three items, I'm comfortable with. if I'm not able to make those presentations on the library and the
AmeriCorps.
AmeriCorps. All right. And so I'll be showing up somewhere between that 10 and 10:30 hour. I just want to make you guys all aware of that then.
We'll miss you.
Then I'll make a motion to approve that with those additions
I'll
for
second
the
that.
agenda.
If I can make modifications, I'll try and attend earlier, but yes, so we have a motion to add those items to the item, is that by Commissioner Holland, second by Commissioner Catchmark. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, then the other committee recommendations is the next item. So the committee recommendations is to approve and adopt the recommendations from the August 22nd Committee of the Whole, which was with the Economic Development Partnership and the Wright County Historical Society. These recommendations are just guidance towards the budget, so it's just a collective consensus from those meetings. Ultimately, those numbers that are discussed here could be maintained or changed up or down as we work our way to deciding a final budget and a final levy, which we intend to hopefully pass or need to pass by the end of the month.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Dietrich,
I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Opposed, you sorry? Okay, so the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole pass 4-1. All right. Now we're moving on to the next one would be the discussions of the approval and the recommendations from the August 29th Committee of the Whole budget. So that, once again, this was a robust discussion as we work our way to a final levy and a final budget, which we need to pass here by the end of September. This is some more guidance. Once again, these recommendations can be modified as we work towards the end of the month or can be rendered unnecessary as well. So with that, just looking to approve the consensus from the discussions on August 29th.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Dietrich,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a question. I was opposed to most of them. One or two I was in favor of. Is there any interest in showing that consensus page that we can go through
You want me to read out read off the recommendations?
Well, that'd be helpful if
Sure.
you're open to that.
So the first recommendation, it was the consensus of the board to approve the request for a report writer, office technician, and senior accountant in the finance taxpayer services. Then there was the request of hiring a collections officer was removed from the finance and taxpayers budget. The second recommendation, it was the consensus of the board to approve the request to hire a supervisor infrastructure in the IT department. The third recommendation, it was the consensus of the board to approve the request for a planning and zoning assistant zoning administrator. The fourth request, it was the consensus of the board to approve Wright Soil Water Conservation District's request to hire an engineer at a 50% of the employee cost. It was the fifth recommendation, it was the consensus of the board to deny a request from the Wright County Sheriff's Office to hire another sergeant. The sixth was, it was the consensus of the board to keep $5,000 donation for the Maple Lake Library. The next one was, it was the consensus of the board to remove $75,000 from IT department's professional and technical services line. The next one, it was the consensus of the board to approve the request to hire a social worker the co-responder and the social worker as there was additional grant funding for that position. The next item was, it was a consensus of the board to include a medical clinic reimbursement of $25,000 in revenue in the budget, and an additional $200,000 from the county fund balance reserve was also added to get to the recommended levy of 5.36 as we walked out of the August 29th Committee of the Whole.
So, Mr. Chair, here's a thought, that I could make a motion of the ones that I approved of, and then let the rest, we could flesh out the rest.
I already made a motion.
No, we haven't. We're just open for discussion here.
There wasn't a, there, was there a motion on there? I don't think, there was a previous one, there was.
Previous one?
So we shouldn't have a discussion, so before oh, my bad here. So we had a motion, and so before we can have any further discussion, I have to have a second. Have you had a do I have a second? Do I have?
She seconded it.
I did, and Jeannie did.
Okay,
This is discussion.
Jeannie seconded, so we're having a discussion, okay.
Yeah.
So now you can either vote, so at this point, you're having a discussion, we can vote, right now the motion is to vote for it holistically, or, and you can vote against it, or you can ask the motion makers to reconsider it and to have them rescind their motions and make them on a individualized basis.
Wait, I'll just ask.
At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters, because this is really just a recommendation to try and get to the final levy. So whether you're for it or against it, even if the recommendations were voted down 4-1 at this point, that just tells, this is just a recommendation to staff as to what they should be putting in the budget or not. It's helping them get a flavor of where the board is at in terms of a budget. So it's nothing binding.
So Chairman, they're not going to sit comfortably though until the end of September. Is that correct?
The biggest thing this is here is as a board chair and working with staff, I'm trying to make sure that I can count to at least 3 board members that will support a levy, as we have, I need to get at least 3 votes to approve a levy by the end of September. So this right here is just my guiding tool as we have these discussions to figure out where people are at in terms of a dollar amount and what things should be in the budget and what things should not be in the budget.
So, Mr. Chair, I just think on consistency basis that we could, like we do a lot of recommendations, we will piece and part them out, and we'll do it one-on-one. I'll make it simple as a friendly amendment to, I'm for 5 and against 5, and I could list out, if people were open to that, the motion makers, that the motion to approve would be first these ones that I'm in line with, just to keep it consistent with the recommendation and how we voted. I know it's all subject to change.
So 5 is a no vote anyway, so that one is the recommendation.
Number 5?
Yeah, number 5 is
Right.
the recommendation to deny it.
Yes. Yep.
So,
So we had a common no, and we had 4 uncommon no's, and we had 5 common yeses.
and that's, at the end of the day, I mean, we can, I guess if you want to go on record articulating what you're in favor of and not, I'm mostly just trying to get a holistic group here to agree that, is there at least 3 people of this board that are in favor with these recommendations?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I believe Commissioner Ketchmark already articulated the ones he disagreed with. I don't want a friendly amendment. I will not. I would like to move forward. These are just recommendations to get the preliminary budget at the end of September. And we can go down from here. We can't go up. So if we take these recommendations, we can discuss them all again if you want at our next meeting. But for right now, these are the recommendations when we left that meeting that we had agreed to.
There'll be more discussions on it to that point. So I think we're, at the end of the day, it's just a guiding tool for staff. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
All right. The recommendations from the August 29th Committee of the Whole passed 4-1. All right. Now, the next item was adopt the Committee of the Whole budget. So we had some target dates. I know they were looking at September 12th at 8 a.m. I do notice, I thought I'm going to try and make it if I can. And then if I do make it, I will make the workshop, but I'm trying to reschedule some other items. September's a tough month for me here, so.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
how deep are we going to get into that, in that discussion then, on the budget?
Is there, so who's not available on the 12th in the afternoon? Is there a reason we can't go to the 12th in the afternoon and just go to the workshop?
Open for that.
You what?
I'd be
I
open for that.
might not be able to. I can verify.
Here, so what time, how late are you available on the 12th?
It would be better if it was late morning.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if we just follow
Follow it up.
follow the workshop at like 11:30 and just go right into it, we could be done by 1:30.
Yeah.
If we did be done by 1:30 on the
Let's power it through.
power right through, and then just not do the 8 a.m. before the workshop. That would be my best recommendation, so start the workshop at 9, and then we'll just power right through, and I think we should be able to just pack a bag lunch, and we'll hopefully have it all done by 1:30. All right, so then I'll entertain a motion to set a committee of the whole for the budget discussion on September 12th at 11 o'clock, and if we get to it later, we get to it later, just following the workshop. But I'll set it at 11 so we can start right. If the workshop will get done early, I don't want us to have to wait at all.
Mr. Chair, and again, I'm just wondering, how deep are we getting into this? Is everything on the table, or what's your plan, or?
So at this point, anything, I mean, anytime we have a budget discussion, anything's available, anything's at the table. I would ask that anything you are interested in discussing, that you articulated to our administration and finance prior to the September 12th, so that they can come, and the departments that you are asking to make the cut can be available to answer questions on what the impact would be. So that would be the one thing that I would articulate. If you have potential adjustments to the budget, whether it's up or down, please articulate that to a finance and administration prior to the September 12th committee of the whole, so that staff can be prepared to discuss those items.
So if it's an appropriation per se, and I'm just maybe guessing, but would we figure that we already heard enough from the folks that want the appropriation, that it should just be a board discussion?
So if it's an appropriation, we still want to articulate it to finance, just so that they can have the numbers and what the impact would be. We will probably articulate to that entity that the board is interested in making a modification to that appropriation. However, we will not, as board chair, I'm not necessarily interested in any kind of presentations. I maybe will, if they want to be available to answer any one-off questions, that may be fine, but I am not taking further presentations at this point.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
All right. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to set a budget committee of the whole on September 12th at 11 a.m.
So moved.
All right, motion by Commissioner Shane, second by Commissioner Holland. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And the last one was to set a special board meeting on Tuesday, September, I'm gonna keep calling it the 25th, the 26th at 9 a.m. With the one agenda item of passing the county levy for 2024. Or the preliminary levy for 2024.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Catchmark.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shane. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right. The last one is the advisory committee updates. Administrator Kelly?
Just a quick reminder, I believe you've all been receiving the emails from AMC, the upcoming conferences. I know some of you may be registered for the fall policy. They did also just release the registration for the December conference, so just look out for those. I think that's all I had for today. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Catchmark?
I didn't have anything. The meetings we had were all attended by one or more board members, so I don't have any extras.
All right.
I as well, nothing.
So coming up here, probably in a workshop in September, I will do a little bit more of a update on the Central Mississippi Regional Planning Partnership, which is now kind of the 9410 group. That's CMRP. Update on where we are with the river crossing and transportation solution in the Pell process and the transition of this group into a potential 501c3 coalition lobbying effort group. And so in kind of some discussions as they will be going to soliciting a lot of public comment over the next 6 to 12 months as part of the Pell process. I'm targeting kind of the October workshop for that discussion, but I just want to keep everybody aware of that. Second item, I'm going to get the consensus of the board if they would be willing to entertain a letter of support from the county board holistically for my application to continue serving on the State Energy Transition Advisory Panel. The board was a temporary panel that was created a number of years back. The board supported my application on there, an appointment to that advisory board by deed. That board was now made permanent, and I have been asked to apply to continue serving on that board. And I need a letter of recommendation from the elected office or the board that I serve on. So looking to see if the board would grant me such a letter of recommendation again.
Absolutely.
So I have a consensus of that?
Sure. And Mr. Chair, are they assigning a term limit to this, or
I believe it's 3 years.
starting with this one? 'Cause
Starting this year, yep, because it's just made over permanency, yep.
well, thank you for continued interest in that, and I was here when we went through it the first time.
First time,
When a citizen brought it up to us, and then we figured, just for background, that it might be better served by a board member. But someone else brought it forward and thought they'd be a good fit, and then board decision was to go this direction last year, I think.
it's a very insightful one. As I served on it before, I brought back a variety of information and things that we discussed on there. A lot of information on the power grid and a lot of different information on the shifting tax bases from traditional coal to solar, wind, and what that means from a tax base. And this group is largely not so much there to make the recommendation on whether we should use coal or not, or whether we should use solar or not. It's mostly about making recommendations when making these transitions on what that does to local tax bases and what the taxation should look like to these different entities as we change from one energy system to another.
Just glad you're on that committee.
Well, thank you. That's all I have to share.
Do we need a motion on that, or?
I,
I think I heard consensus among the
Oh,
group. We
okay.
can draft a letter of
Okay.
support
All right.
from the board for that
I
action.
think John has one from before. All right.
On the 23rd of August, Michelle and Deanna from the Shack, they lead Shack, which is our governing body for public health. They came out just to see what all, met with me and Sarah, and it was nice to have them, be able to give them input about how our county works, and they're making a push to go to all the counties, and so it was really nice that they came out to visit with us, and that's about it.
Thank you.
Just real quick, Commissioner Holland and I attended the Wright County Community Action Annual Meeting last Thursday, and it was very well done, well attended, good information, and just to applaud all the work that organization does for the people in Wright County. Very grateful.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion or anything else that needs to come before the Wright County Board? Hearing none, all in favor, or no, sorry, we don't do in favor, I just adjourned it, I'm sorry. All right, then with that, we will adjourn the county board meeting at 10:33.
Thanks.